Spending a few weeks thinking about the 7 I am statements of the Lord Jesus found in John's Gospel, 7 occasions when Jesus said, I am the, and then described himself in a particular way. Last week, we looked at the first of those statements in chapter 6 and verse 35, where Jesus said, I am the bread of life. This morning, we're looking at the second of those statements found in John chapter 8 and verse 12. John chapter 8 and verse 12, which says that Jesus spoke again to the people and said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I am the light of the world. That's a remarkable thing that Jesus said. It's a truly remarkable claim, isn't it? Just pause and think about that for a moment. Imagine anybody in the world today, anybody at all, a politician, an entertainer, a sportsman, sportswoman. Imagine anybody appearing on television, perhaps in an interview or a press conference, and looking into the camera and saying, I am the light of the world. How would the public respond to that? What would the headlines on the front pages of the tabloid newspapers be the next morning? How would you view somebody who made such a claim? Well, if somebody said those words, they would either be dismissed as extremely foolish, a bit of a nutcase, or as being extremely arrogant. 2,000 years ago, in the temple courts at Jerusalem, at the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, when candles were lit that shone as lights in the darkness, Jesus of Nazareth said, I am the light of the world. And at the time, some people dismissed those words. Many people still do. But many other people have come to the conclusion that these words of Jesus Christ are true. And believing that these words are true, they have followed Jesus Christ and continue to do so. And the question for you this morning, the question for us all this morning is simply this. What will you do with these words of Jesus Christ? I am the light of the world. As C.S. Lewis said, and others have made the same argument, when Jesus Christ said things like this, they are either the words of a man who was mad, a nutcase, or they are the words of a man who was bad, a man of incredible arrogance, or They were the truth. When Jesus said, I am the light of the world, was he speaking the truth? And if so, then why would you not follow him? Let's think then about these words. Let's think first of all about the claim that Jesus made. What a claim it is. I am the light of the world. And in saying these words, in making this claim, Jesus said something about the world, and he said something about himself. So in making the claim, I am the light of the world, Jesus told us something about the world. In saying, I am the light of the world, Jesus implied that without him, the world is a dark place. Without him, the world is a dark place. And can you argue with that? Can you argue with the biblical teaching that this world that we live in is a dark place? Now, that does not mean that there's no good in the world, that there are no sparks of light in the world. Many people do many good things and kind things, and we're thankful for that. Yet there is a great darkness in the world. There's much cruelty in the world. There's lots of conflict in the world. There's lots of confusion in the world. Confusion about God, confusion about the way to know God, confusion about life and death and heaven and hell. There's lots of immorality in the world. There is a spiritual and moral darkness in the world that at times we can almost feel. You can almost feel the darkness in the air at times. And where does this spiritual and moral darkness come from? Well, the answer the Bible gives to that is that it doesn't come from out there. But the spiritual and moral darkness that there is in the world comes from in here. It comes from your heart and from my heart. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 18, the Apostle Paul, speaking of people in their natural condition without God, says this, that they are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. People's hearts are naturally hard towards God. And this leads to an ignorance about God. And this leads to a darkness in their understanding and a darkness then in their thinking and behavior. The world is a dark place because the hearts of the people do not know and love God. And not only then is the world a place of spiritual and moral darkness, but for all kinds of reasons. We go through dark times as we live in this world. Psalm 88, very powerful psalm, in which the psalmist talks about going through a prolonged period of darkness. The psalmist says at the end of that psalm that darkness is my only friend. Sometimes you can feel that, can't you? That Darkness is your companion, such as the darkness that you're going through. The hymn writer says, even of the Christian life, the days of darkness still come over me. Sorrow's paths I often tread. And here we are then in this world of spiritual and moral darkness, where we often find ourselves going through dark days, dark times. And in such a world, then, we need a light. We need a light in the darkness. But where do we find that light? Well, we could spend time, we could spend a lifetime studying human nature and trying to think about God and trying to think about life and death. And some people do. But without God himself giving us the light, we will remain in the dark. Where will we find a light that will shine into the spiritual and moral darkness of the world and will show us God and show us the way to God? Where will we find a light that will shine upon us and will help us and guide us through days of darkness? Well, in saying these words, Jesus didn't just say something about the world, but he said something about himself. And he said that he is the light that we need. I am the light of the world. Jesus Christ tells us that he is the one who shines into the darkness and shows us God. He is the one who shines into the darkness and shows us the way to God. He is the one who shines into the darkness and shows us what is right and wrong. He is the one who shines into the darkness and shows us heaven and the way to heaven. He is the one who shines into the darkness to lead us and to guide us as we make our way through the darkness of life. He is the light. I am the light, he says. Now, in saying this, in saying, I am the light of the world, Jesus said that he is the one who was promised by God for many years. There are many promises in the Old Testament. Part of the Bible written before he came, written hundreds of years before he came. There are many promises in it saying that one day a Savior would come who would bring light to the world. So in Isaiah chapter 9, we have that great promise that we often think about at Christmas time. To us a son is born, to us a child is given. The government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. But what does it say just a few verses before that about the coming of this wonderful one? It says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. Isaiah was saying that when this child, this glorious one comes into the world, people will see a light. Isaiah said the same thing later on, chapter 42 and verse 6. God says to his Son, Jesus Christ, I will keep you, I will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles. Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 6. God says the same thing again to his Son, Jesus Christ, I will make you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. Jesus Christ is the promised light who has come into the world. And look at what he says here. He says, I am the light of the world. The light of the world. Up until the coming of Jesus Christ, the Israelites had the light of God. They had the prophets and the word of God and the promises of God. They had light to guide them through the darkness. But the rest of the world, the Gentiles, the nations, remained in darkness. But Jesus Christ came and said that he was light not just for the Israelites, but for all the world. He's light not just for certain parts of the world, what we might think of as Christian parts of the world, but Jesus Christ is the light of the whole world. He's light not just for certain personality types, the kinds of people we might think of as religious people, but he's light for all kinds of people all over the world. Occasionally, offers are made, aren't they, for certain people, but to be eligible for that offer, to receive that offer, you have to live at a certain address with a certain postcode. For instance, young people going to university, that they may be offered extra funding if they live in a certain address with a certain postcode in what's considered perhaps a more deprived area. Or, a leisure centre may put on a special offer, special rates, cheaper rates for people who live nearby. If you have a certain address with a certain postcode near to that leisure centre, well, you can go in at a reduced rate. If your address is right, if your postcode is right, you benefit from these offers. And sometimes you can feel a bit frustrated. You hear about one of these offers and you look to see if it's for you, and you're just outside the boundary. You think, if I lived a few more streets that way, I'd be able to get these cheaper rates. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. As long as your address is somewhere in the world, as long as your postcode is somewhere in the world, then there is a light for you, a light offered to you. I am the light of the world. But you might say at this point, well, yes, I can see that the world is a dark place. I don't argue with that. I can see that the world needs a light. And you might say, and I can see it in this verse, and in chapter 1 that we read earlier, and other places in the Bible, that Jesus claimed to be the light. But you might say, how do we know that he is what he claimed to be? After all, anybody could say these words. Anybody could say, I am the light of the world. How do we know that when Jesus said these words, he was speaking the truth? How do we know that he really is the light of the world? Well, think about him. Think about his teaching. The things he taught, the things he said. They shine light upon the most important subjects. By his teaching, Jesus shines light upon God, upon life, upon death, upon sin, upon righteousness. He shines light upon heaven and upon hell. He shines light upon the way to know God and to be right with God. His teaching shines light upon the things that we need to hear more than anything else. Well, think about his life. Think about the life that he lived, the sinless life that he lived. Can you see anything that is dark in Jesus' life? Do you see anything that is sinful in Jesus' life? Even his enemies who looked for things to accuse him of could find nothing dark in his life or character. Later on in this same chapter, in verse 46, he said to those who were opposing him, who were challenging him, "Can any of you prove me guilty of sin?" Again, you imagine anybody else saying that? Can any of you accuse me of sin? Well, where do we start, people would say, but Jesus could say that. Because his life, his whole life was light, was pure, was good, was holy. Well, think about his miracles, the miracles he performed. He performed many miracles. John, in this gospel, focuses especially upon 7 of them. Writes at length about these 7 miracles, these miracles that show us who Jesus is, why he came. And at the end of his gospel, John tells us that these miracles, the things that Jesus did, they are a light. They show us who Jesus is. They show him to be the Son of God, come from heaven to save people. Chapter 20, verse 30, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Think about the way he dealt with people. The way he dealt with people he met in John's Gospel. In chapter 3, he met with a religious man. In chapters 4 and 8, he met with women who were outcasts. In chapter 9, he met a man who was born blind. Chapter 11, he met a grieving family. And into the darkness of all these people's lives, Jesus shone light. The light of God, the light of heaven. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." And again and again and again, in the things he did and the things he said, he showed himself to be the light of the world. And supremely, he showed himself to be the light of the world when he rose from the dead, to live and to reign forever, and to give light to people, salvation to people all over the world. And so this is the claim that Jesus made: I am the light of the world. But that's not all he did in this verse. He didn't just make this great claim. He also made a call. And having thought about the claim that Jesus made, let's think now about the call that Jesus made. These 7 I am sayings that Jesus made about himself in John's Gospel, they were not just given in order to provide us with information about him. They were not just given for us to say, "Oh, well, that's nice, that's interesting." In giving these statements about himself, "I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world," Jesus was calling for a response. He's calling you to make a response to him. And we saw last week that when he says, "I am the bread of the life," he calls you to come to him and eat, to believe in him and be saved. And here in these words, he says, I am the light of the world. And then he calls for a response. And this call at the end of verse 12, it is at the same time both a call and a promise. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me. Jesus calls you to follow him, to follow the light, as the Israelites followed that light, that pillar of fire in the darkness through the wilderness. So Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Follow me, follow this light. This is one of the ways that the New Testament describes what it means to be a Christian. A Christian is somebody who follows Jesus Christ. That means that they follow his summons to repent of their sin, to confess their sin, to turn from their sin and believe in him. It means that they follow his instruction to live a life of humble daily obedience to him. In chapter 14 and verse 15 of John's Gospel, Jesus says very clearly and simply, if you love me, you will obey my commands. Live a life following me. It means that they follow him all through life. Through its ups and through its downs. In good times and in bad times. When those days of darkness come over them, they continue to follow him. Continue to follow Jesus Christ. Last week we looked at Jesus' words in chapter 6, I am the bread of life. At the end of chapter 6, towards the end of chapter 6, we read of people who heard Jesus' teaching and began to follow him, but when that teaching became difficult, when following him became difficult, we're told in chapter 6 and verse 66 that many of them turned back and no longer followed him. But if Jesus is truly the light of the world, then we're to follow him, we're to follow that light always. No matter how hard it becomes at times, we follow him, we follow that light. And notice what he says here. He says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. We've seen that the world is a place of darkness, spiritual, moral darkness, and we've seen that darkness begins in here, begins in our hearts, and Jesus says, follow me, and you won't walk in the darkness anymore. Follow me. I am the light of the world. I'll bring you out of darkness. I'll bring you into the light. He said something very similar just a few chapters later, chapter 12 and verse 46. I have come into the world as a light so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. Isn't that a lovely thing that Jesus says? I have come into the world as a light so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. There's no reason for you to stay in the darkness. Because Jesus Christ has come into the world to bring light. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. When people turn to Jesus Christ, believe in Jesus Christ, follow Jesus Christ, they're delivered from darkness, delivered from the darkness of a life without God. Delivered from the darkness of ignorance and confusion about God. Delivered from spiritual and moral darkness and confusion. When you turn to Jesus Christ and follow Jesus Christ, you're delivered from darkness now. And when you turn to Jesus Christ and follow Jesus Christ, you're also delivered from the darkness to come. Jesus himself spoke of eternity under the wrath of God, eternity in hell as eternity in a place of outer darkness. But he says, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. Whoever follows me, he says, is saved from the darkness now and from the darkness to come. How can that be? How can it be that we who are sinful, whose sin deserves the judgment of God, how can it be that by following Jesus Christ we can be saved from the darkness to come? It's because the darkness fell upon Jesus Christ when he hung on the cross. He who is the light of the world was nailed to a cross. And as the light of the world hung upon the cross, darkness came down. 3 hours of supernatural darkness came down upon him. And he took upon himself the darkness of God's wrath upon sin, so that all who believe in him, all who follow him, are delivered from that darkness. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. You follow me. Not only will I deliver you from darkness, but I'll give you light. And not just a little bit of light. No. Jesus doesn't say, whoever follows me will have a bit of twilight. Whoever follows me will have a little glimmer of light. He says, whoever follows me will have the light of life. Jesus Christ gives life. He gives light to those who follow him. And so, when you follow Jesus Christ, though you still live in the darkness of this world, and though days of darkness still come over you, he gives you light. He gives you understanding. He gives you the light of his truth, the light of his word. He shines light upon your path to show you how to think, how to speak, how to behave, to show you what is right, to show you what is wrong, to show you what is honoring to God. He gives you light and comfort when you go through those dark days. And he leads you all the way through this dark world to the light of heaven, to the light of the world to come. The Bible has many beautiful descriptions of heaven, the world, and the world to come. One of the ways that the Bible speaks about heaven and the world to come is as a place of light. We've seen that this world is a place of darkness. We've seen that eternity under the wrath of God is eternity in a place of outer darkness. But eternity with Jesus Christ, eternity in heaven, is eternity in a place of light. And so in the book of Isaiah, chapter 60, verses 19 and 20, we have this glorious promise that the Son will no more be your light by day, nor will the brightness of the moon shine on you, for the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your God will be your glory. Your sun will never set again, your moon will wane no more. The Lord will be your everlasting light, and your days of sorrow will end. Or then in the book of Revelation, chapter 21 and verse 23, as the Apostle John is given a glimpse of the heavenly city, the world to come, he says the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. And so, as was asked at the beginning, what will you do with these words of Jesus Christ? I am the light of the world. Are they the words of one who was mad? Are they the words of one who was bad? Are they foolish words? Are they arrogant words? Or are they true? I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light. Will you follow the light of the world? Will you follow Jesus Christ through the darkness of this world? Will you have him lead you and take you to the light of heaven?